Well, let's talk more about Mandla Msibi and the ANC. We're joined by the party's national spokesperson, Pule Mabe, who's with me in studio tonight. Pule, good evening. Welcome to the program. Let's start with the basics. What is the status of Mandla Msibi in the ANC tonight?
Well, evening to your viewers. He remains suspended temporarily owing to the step-aside rule. He would have previously served in the provincial executive committee of Mpumalanga province before it was disbanded. He had, at the time of him being charged, written to the party advising the organization that he will be stepping aside from his organizational responsibility, and he also, out of his own volition, resigned as MEC in the provincial executive of Mpumalanga. Now
that delegates in Mpumalanga have now elected him as of Saturday, how does that complicate the picture? What is the technicality that you now have to iron out?
Well, what had since happened is that the Treasurer General has since written a letter to him reminding him of the step-aside guidelines and the resolution, including the letter that he had written to the party. And also, subsequent to that, the Treasurer General also spoke to him, and Comrade Mandla has accepted that he remains suspended and will not be able to discharge any responsibility associated with the office of the Provincial Treasurer.
So, as things stand, he is not going to take up this role of Provincial Treasurer in Mpumalanga?
Yes, in the intervening period, he's not going to take that role while he has stepped aside from the organization.
So Mandla Msibi, when he was elected treasurer of the ANC in Mpumalanga on Saturday, was already in and out of a court process. He's facing 2 counts for murder, 1 for attempted murder. What does it say then about the ANC's delegates in Mpumalanga that despite those serious charges, they still saw it fit to elect the same man?
Well, I mean, there's work that has to be done internally in the organization. Remember, when you have stepped aside, you have not necessarily resigned as a member of the African National Congress. You are still a member. What we need to be doing, which I think Comrade Gwen also tried to outline and explain, is that we have got to tighten those guidelines. I mean, it's a living document. It's work in progress. We have to say, given these experiences that we have since gathered, what are the things that we think as the National Executive Committee need to be tightened so that there is a common understanding on the application of the step-aside rule? Because once there is that common understanding, then it makes it easier for us to go on with our work.
I'll get back to the tightening of the step-aside rule and its understanding among the ANC members, but for a province to elect a man accused of as serious a crime as you can be accused of in this country and across the world, really, murder, not just once but twice, suggests then that ANC delegates who were at this conference in Mpumalanga on Saturday do not think it's serious enough or simply do not care.
No, but I think you are being unfair to ANC members because we do not incriminate people because they are charged. When you are charged, you remain innocent until proven guilty.
True.
So let me make my point. So now, when we took a decision on members stepping aside, we said when we are charged of serious crimes or indicted to appear in a court of law, you will have to step aside. And the reason why this was created, as part of restoring the credibility and integrity of the African National Congress, we said it will give you sufficient time to deal with your own issues without necessarily having to drag the image and name of the organization along with you. And we further went on and said, because we know sometimes these things take time to resolve, that every 6 months, as part of those conditionalities, we will be able to conduct a review. So we need to make sure, because it's for the first time that the ANC finds itself faced with a situation like this and having to implement this kind of resolution.
So Mandla Msibi himself, as you say, has gone and played according to the step-aside resolution itself, right? You said he's also already said to you he's not going to come back. What I'm talking about are the members who know of the step-aside resolution and what it says about... let me get through the point. Who know about the step-aside resolution, what it means for office bearers in the ANC, yet and still knowing the reputational risk to the ANC and the gravity of the charges. Yes, he's not been convicted. Still went and thought, this is the person we think is best suited to represent the ANC in the office of the provincial treasurer. And what I'm asking you is, what does that say about where ANC members in Mpumalanga are in terms of their understanding of the step-aside resolution and their approach, their view on charges of murder, especially against the leader?
Well, that's a very unfair question to members of the African National Congress.
Well, they elected him.
Yes, they elected him. They are aware that he is appearing before a court of law on serious charges.
But they don't think it should be a problem that disqualifies him, because if they did, they wouldn't have elected him.
Well, you see, that is why tightening the rules, part of tightening the rules means us having to define, because in its current form, the guidelines are not emphatic on what happens when you have stepped aside. The guidelines are not saying that when you have stepped aside, you can or cannot stand for a position. Now, now members know the guidelines. So now if the guidelines were saying a member cannot stand at the time that they've stepped aside, surely the members would have acted in accordance with that. Now, because we are seeing that there could be a gray area there, we need to clarify that.
So it's a failure by the crafters of the rules.
No, it's not a failure. It's not a failure. You see, experience is the best teacher. The ANC wouldn't have known what would have happened in certain instances up until it comes through certain experiences. So now, okay, at a constructive level, the document, the guidelines are a living document. It's work in progress. So every time, you don't introduce regulations, even in your own space, in the media space. When you introduce regulations, from time to time, you refine them based on the experiences you pick up. But when is the ANC? So the ANC, according to how this thing is playing itself out, or the ANC ought to have known. Because you come across as saying exactly that no, but you ought. But we put conditionalities. When experiences present themselves, we don't turn a blind eye. We then come back and say, what is it that needs to be done? The Treasurer General, acting on behalf of the Secretary General's office, has already dispatched a letter to Comrade Mandla, reminding him of decisions of the National Executive Committee. Has even went further, out of that greatness of humility, to file a call reminding Comrade Mandla of this. Comrade Mandla has himself agreed to those conditionalities. What we now need to do ourselves, when we meet in the NWC and in the NEC, when we make a fair reflection on this, we now need to then say, to make sure that there is no vagueness, there is a common understanding even across our structures, what becomes the status of a member who has stepped aside? Remember, he's still a member of the ANC, by the way. He's a member of the ANC in good standing, albeit having stood aside. But he's a member of the ANC, and the constitution of the ANC defines a member. Now, you have to make sure that your guidelines, the constitution of the African National Congress, and all of your policy undertakings, especially ones that deal with the credibility and standing of the African National Congress, are in sync. If they are not, you could be accused along the way of not being consistent on how you apply this. Because remember, if you don't pronounce yourself now, and there are many other conferences that must sit, the risk is that precedence has got a way of just producing its own laws and rules.
Just on that point then, yes, you say, you admit tonight that the ANC had not foreseen that there'd be a situation where a conference elects someone who has stepped aside or has in fact faced a court process where they're facing charges for serious crime, in this case murder, right? But that then sounds like a massive oversight by the people who crafted the rules, because why did no one, are you saying in the meeting where, hang on a minute, where these rules were decided, no one thought, what do we do in a situation where we are in an organization where people are elected by popular vote, by branches? We may have a situation where someone or branches want to elect a person who indeed is facing criminal allegations.
Well, I don't think it's correct, because if I leave it, someone watching this interview will think that I say the crafters did not see. No, that's not what I'm saying.
Did they discuss it?
What I'm saying is that you have got to create a link between the Constitution of the African National Congress. The Constitution of the African National Congress defines who is a member. It went on to then outlines the rights of a member. A member has got the right to nominate and be nominated. This is now in the Constitution. But the very Constitution of the ANC empowers the NEC to develop guidelines that will guide the work of the National Executive Committee in the intervening period, including on how it implements resolutions of conference. Now, the 54th National Conference of the ANC then takes a decision on stepping aside, then empowers the NEC to then go and develop guidelines on how it implements such a resolution. Similar cases with all other resolutions. Now you have gotten the guidelines. You pronounce yourself. You say, this is now a living document. It's work in progress, but I'm implementing it. It means as I implement it and I draw certain experiences, I could be able to then go back and enrich that. Because so that's what you do. And once enriched, you then make sure that there is a common understanding, there is a consistent implementation of the guidelines, then there is no confusion. You then say, if we say, Pule, during the period that you have stepped aside, you are barred from standing for a position of leadership because you are considered to be temporarily suspended and there's not been a review that pronounced otherwise. Then there's a clear understanding. Then when it goes down to members, members already know how they are supposed to react in such instances.
So it sounds like something that should have been a basic consideration, but I want to move on because you were just talking about the potential risks for the ANC that come from this moment.
But I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you.
You can add your response to this question when you answer as well, because you've got under 2 minutes or so to go. So you've said earlier in an earlier response that one of the concerns that the ANC has, and this was said by President Ramaphosa as well at the conference, is that it may pose an issue in other ANC structures in other provinces, right? So as things stand, how much do you worry that you may have an issue with dissent among members in Mpumalanga who elected Mandla Msibi to be their treasurer and may not be happy now that the party is saying he should indeed not serve in that post where they've elected him to?
But remember that the National Executive Committee does not develop resolutions for itself. You know, so these resolutions are resolutions of conference. All we are doing ourselves is that we are facilitating the implementation of conference resolutions. I don't know of a member of the ANC who becomes, who expresses dissent out of the implementation of resolutions taken at a conference. Because the National Executive Committee doesn't have powers to introduce its own resolutions. So where I said I don't agree with you is where you say basic consideration. No, we had considered all of these situations. The issue is practically.
So why is there no room for this then, if you considered it, to deal with people who are accused but then become elected at conference? Well, if you'd considered it, you should have written it into the resolution.
Well, the fact that the Treasurer General has written to Comrade Mandla in the manner that he has done, that alone should tell you that we know very well that even if you are elected while you have stepped aside, for that period, it means that you remain, your participation in the organization remains regulated by those step-aside guidelines.
Is Batabile Dlamini going to receive a letter that is similar to what Mandla Msibi got? Reporting that there'd be a meeting today. Has it happened?
Well, I had reports from yourselves.
Not me. I also heard other reports. That's what I'm asking you.
Well, I'm saying I had report from yourselves. I mean yourselves in the media. That's why I'm saying it in plural terms. I had reports from the media that there's going to be that meeting. So
did it happen?
Well, I'm going to wait either from the media to give us that feedback because they are the ones who really ran with the story.
Okay, so will she receive a letter similar to the one that Mandla Msibi got saying he should step aside?
Well, there is a process. We shouldn't try too hard. There's a process. We have spoken about that. We had a briefing of the African National Congress where we said that there's a process that is going to be led by our national officials. That process would include engagement with Comrade Bata.
So she can still receive such a letter?
No. I think we can't use your studio here to define ANC processes.
She could, is what I'm asking, still receive a letter. I'm not saying she will. I'm saying she could.
Let's limit the letter to the issue we're talking about of Mandla. If there's an issue of letters that require us to come and talk to next time, you are aware that we are always available. We don't... even if there are difficult issues, we always come and talk to those because part of renewing the ANC means us going out and explaining even this most difficult of issues. Because we shouldn't shy away to explain these issues, no matter how difficult they may sound. Because ultimately, we need to make sure that our members, our structures out there, understand that we are only implementing their own resolutions, not resolutions of the National Executive Committee.